I want to welcome you again. I'm Gloria Kondrup, the Executive Director of the HMCT, Hoffmitz Milken Center for Typography, and I'm here with Sean Adams, my wonderful partner in crime and co-host of the Summer Salons, and our wonderful guest for this episode, designer Jennifer Morla. I will leave the screen very shortly. Sean and Jennifer will take over, of course, and I will pop back, Sean and Jennifer, when it's appropriate. And I will be looking at your Q&As. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. And I'm now turning it over to you, Sean and Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Gloria, as always. And Jennifer, I'm so excited to see you. I miss you so much.
I miss you so much too.
I'm like, need to see you in person.
That would be good.
Like, that'd be
I know,
nice.
will that be again? I mean, my Lord.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, this is such a great opportunity for everybody. And we get to see you in your own home. We get to like...
Yes, this is my studio. And since we've been doing everything remotely with the two people I have as my designer and my office manager, it's really, we've been actually remote for over a year now before the whole COVID thing. And
it worked fine, right?
It's fantastic. I mean, I think we're lucky to be in the profession we're in this situation, because we're familiar with, I'll be put to the test of how good my technology is.
Right.
But we're familiar with sharing screens and doing presentations that way. So it's been it's what I like to call we're reimagining time right now. It's sort of reimagining time in our history, our own personal history. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like this was coming, but we all knew it was going down, that we were eventually going to get to this place where, you could collaborate with people all around the world. You could talk to clients everywhere. You didn't have to be in the same city. It just happened faster than we thought it would.
That's exactly right. But we were prepared somewhat. You're right.
Yeah. But it's so great. And I'm so happy that you're with us. And
thank you for inviting me, by the way.
Of course. No, you're a superstar. We have to have you. I think everybody is excited that you're here. And obviously, you're one of my oldest friends, not old, but, one of my longest friends that I've had. And people don't know this about you, but you're so endlessly gracious and welcoming, and, you dedicate time to education. You dedicate time to the AHA. I think I remember every time I would come up to San Francisco, you'd be like, come to the house, we're having dinner. I mean, you're just out there and just a remarkable human being. And I'm going to turn it over to you before I start gushing too much, and let you manage and talk about it. And then I will deny that if you want. I'll tell people, no, she's horrible. She's very mean. It's entirely up to you.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's just wonderful to be here. And I was thinking, let's see, I was at ArtCenter, 3 years ago, maybe?
I think it was 3 years ago. Yeah.
So, I love it down there. ArtCenter is so fantastic. The students are unbelievable. So, and you're producing such great work out of the departments.
They're pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I will let you go. Share your screen, do whatever you do.
Okay, let me do that. So, great. So I'm starting off with this because at the start of every project that I do, I ask myself these questions. And it's something over the course of my 40 plus years being a designer, I still feel a responsibility to ask how I can design smarter, more truthfully, and less wastefully. And then how can I touch people's lives in a way that resonates meaningfully, which is what design should do. And so design does not live in an aesthetic vacuum. And I mean this because growing up in New York, as a matter of fact, with Milton Glaser just passing away, I was so influenced by what was around me in the 60s and early 70s in Manhattan. I would see posters for Ramparts magazine of Che Guevara, and it felt like history was surrounding us in design. And so design is a very powerful tool. As a matter of fact, I like to say that Paul Davis illustration of Che Guevara was made me actually take a communism course in college. So it sort of opened up my mind and my eyes to sort of new ways of thinking. Design should do that. It should be a voice of dissent. It can be a voice of optimism, but bottom line, it influences and is influenced by contemporary society. And Sean certainly knows this piece. He wrote a really eloquent report on this. This was for El Museo Mexicano, the Mexican Museum in San Francisco. And when they asked me to do this piece, which is an amalgam of Frida Kahlo's face, which is part of their permanent collection. The polka dot is, so the coverings of that I see often in the stores when I go to the Mission. There's the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe to the bottom left, and a loteria ticket, which is not ticket, game that is played by oftentimes in the community. And then the typeface itself that I used for El Museo Mexicano, I actually pulled and cut and pasted from turn of the century wood type. So the purpose of this piece for the museum was to rethink who their audience was in the community. It had a collection of pre-Columbian and colonial art, but they actually had contemporary art also. And we wanted to engage. I wanted this poster to be able to engage with perhaps an audience that was not a part of the museum's clientele. So this was for public bicycles. Rob Forbes asked a number of designers to interpret how bicycles are used, and specifically Public was the name of his bicycle company, Public Bikes. And one of the images that I have so strongly are women. Matter of fact, the Public Bike audience was 85% women. I don't know why that was, but it was a demographic that wasn't shared by many other bicycle companies. Track and a number of others were more male demographic. Public happened to be female. And so with that, I imagined going to the farmer's market and to the flower market. And so you can see down below here, the gear with the bicycle with little asterisks inside. And that's therefore why I put the flowers over here and really appeal to hopefully that audience with this poster. One thing you have to remember with posters is that they're meant to be posted, and they oftentimes outlive what their institution is that they're publicizing, outlive the manufacturer like Public, and they're posted not only in public spaces, but they are taken into our homes and posted on our living room walls. So a poster is a very, very powerful medium. Because of that, it transitions so smoothly from the exterior to the interior of our lives. Unlike, let's say, advertising or a magazine, which you flip past it quickly, and it's much more ephemeral than what a poster is. So there's a longevity that is inherent in the nature of the poster medium. And then, of course, another wonderful thing about posters is their scale. This is for during the Iranian election when the Arab Spring was happening, and I was asked to design a poster. And what I did actually had a dual meaning. That's actually a picture of my lips that I took and then posterized, which is a typical way I do. You saw it in the Frida Kahlo piece. And then not only did I want to talk green, which was the color for voting in Iran and the Iranian flag, but I wanted to metaphorically show a woman's mouth being shut, her not being able to speak out, her not being able to vote, her rights being curtailed in so many different ways. So there's a duality in terms of the meaning on this poster. This was for the Olympic Games, when actually it was a bid for the Olympic Games by San Francisco. So they were trying to get the 2012 Olympics in San Francisco. And one of the things I want to mention is that whenever possible, although it's not conscious on my part, but whenever possible, I use women in my work as a representation of 51% of the population. And because I'm a woman, I can't think any otherwise. As a matter of fact, it's not even a conscious decision at the time that I'm creating, but in retrospect, and most especially when I was doing my book, I saw like, oh my gosh, I have women in so many pieces that I design. And it's because obviously I am one, and we are, we need to be represented more, really. Once again, the adage that I said before, my designism, that design influences society, and I'm hoping with this image here that is representation of powerful swimmer, and that it was California and San Francisco, and emblematic of who we are in San Francisco and our population in San Francisco. So words are important as images, and images can be more powerful than words. I can't think of anybody who did this better actually than Tibor Kalman when he did Colors magazine. There was the image of Queen Elizabeth as an African American, and that just said everything right there. And that's actually when I came up with this designism, when I saw that piece of his. So I keep that in mind too, and I teach this because it's so important. I think as designers, and especially as young designers, we tend to discount copy and how important it is. Not on purpose, but that it's a tool, and we should be respectful, of course, of the copy that we bring in to our work. We should always read what we are basically publicizing. Design can be very seductive propaganda. We have to be very conscious of who and what is being said in the pieces that we're designing for consumption, basically for general consumption out there. So this is a piece, this was for Design Within Reach. And I want to actually reimagine catalogs. And so I want to establish a dialogue between the audience and between a furniture distributor, Design Within Reach manufacturer. And one of the issues was, what is green? And I was struggling with that. What does green even mean? What does green mean in furniture? And I thought, like, instead of showing furniture on the cover, let's really metaphorically talk about that. So on the front cover, you see a piece of sod, and on the back cover, a piece of grass. On the back cover, you see a piece of astroturf. And there's duality here. I mean, really, which one is more green? So that's a sort of dichotomy I like to present in our work. It makes you think, hopefully. And then as we went through the interior of the book, you can see green is upcycling cans into a chair that lasts under 50 years. The image of the crushed cans to the left. Green is alternative uses for 300 million tires discarded annually. And also there's repetition. I mean, as designers, we design words also. You have to think about design that copy, which I did for this. So every spread had green is. So think creatively about how you use words. It's fun, and it's a great tool to have in your designer toolbox. Sorry about that. So designers think like architects. We structure space to engage and facilitate understanding. And oftentimes I use approaches that actually are a narrative that I involve the viewer in. This was for Stanford University, and they had a series of 5 lectures for the study of the novel. And they found that the first couple of lectures were very well attended, and then not so much towards the last 3 lectures. So I did an introduction poster, which is what you're seeing here. And then as the semester went on, you could see which lecture was coming up. And you knew intuitively by the folios being exposed on the books that there were going to be 4 more lectures. This was for Paul Drescher, who was creates experimental compositions, music. And once again, he had an issue with the fact that 2 performances were always equally attended. And so this was a poster that was mailed, and it was out of vellum. And so one side I put the one of the shows on, and the other side another. So instead of having a top-down hierarchy, what we have is a balance between the two. And by the fact that the audience is actually touching the piece and realizing that there's something here on this side, it resonates, and it actually makes people remember an event more. So we have tools. I mean, I think further on, one of my other designisms is the medium is the message. This is a good case to reinforce that, because the actual medium of the vellum actually gave clarity to the message. And it was much the same with this New York Times Magazine cover, The Shock of the Familiar. It's, first off, when you get a call from the New York Times, it's humbling. And a little backstory on this piece. And they said, we want you to design, this was their first ever design issue back in '98. And they said, we want to ask you to design the cover of our first ever design issue. It's going to be called The Shock of the Familiar. And, you know, you're just like, of course. And, oh, well, you have to do it in 2 weeks. Okay. You know, of course, I would just clear the decks just to make sure that I would be able to have the time to do it. Oh, and by the way, you know, we only have $2,000. Absolutely fine. You know, thank you. And they said, oh, but we have something else to tell you. We're going to ask 5 other designers to also do a cover. And I said, oh, okay. And what happens with the losers? Said, oh, don't worry. We're going to be publishing the losers inside the magazine also. So the pressure was on. I actually didn't think that they would go with this solution, which they did. It was the winning entry, so to speak, where I took their masthead and I put it upside down on the magazine. And because of that, I made the viewer understand that even the magazine, the object that they were touching was a designed object also, because the interior, the editorial content was how everything is designed. Every object, everything you ever see is designed by somebody. And by flipping that masthead over, it sort of made hopefully it made a consciousness to the readers that they were also touching a designed object. This was for Cho Chocolate. And what was fun about this packaging is that, from a retail standpoint, this packaging elicits multiple sales. And I'll tell you the reason why is because you could buy actually, you know, one box, let's say with an X, and then you could do an XO, or you could spell out LOVE. Each box had, I think, 12 chocolates in it. So you have love, you have, you know, you had fun. You could spell the person's name. So this was a really fun way of thinking about how to design in retail, and also made for great displays in store. This was for offshoot of Design Within Reach called Tools for Living. And when I say architects, you know, we think like architects. One of the aspects, I do a lot of retail design also, is that you want to drive a person into a store. Most people, when they enter a store, they are, especially a store that they're not familiar with, they're very hesitant to go in. So I really am a big believer in creating a strong back wall, so it drives you in. And then you can see here, even on the right, I did copy that talks about what is tools for living. In fact, they were basic sort of tools that are necessary for a well-designed life. And I use the image of a paperclip to epitomize the simplicity and the importance of design in these tools. And close up of the back wall of these essential tools. So a good designer is a great storyteller, and every company, institution, service has a story to tell. And I really encourage everybody to use real words. Don't use that corporate rhetoric, and work with your client in that way. If you don't feel you can write, then let's hire somebody who can really write in a way that speaks meaningfully to your audience. So my audience here, this is for Levi's. Prior to opening up my office in '84, I was art director at Levi Strauss, and they continued to be a client for many, many years. You'll see a couple of the projects in here that I did for them. This was, the thing about working with Levi's in general is that everybody knows what a pair of Levi's looks like. And this was to appeal to a younger audience, of 15 to 18 years old. And I wanted to talk about, so being a designer is being involved with every aspect of the project. I cast this woman. I used Jock McDonald as my photographer. She's 16 years old. She was just lovely. And in my handwriting, I call this handwriting 3-ring binder script, because at least back when I was in high school, we had these sort of blue 3-ring binders, and we would take our big pens and sort of doodle all over them and do this funny little script. So this is my 3-ring binder script. And I asked her, because this poster was to really sort of affirm who wears Levi's. And she told me the story about her and her friends in her neighborhood, these boys, that they would play King of the Mountain. And she was really good at it. And she was so good that she said, I guess you could call me Queen of the Mountain. And that was just such a wonderful story of empowerment and confidence, that, you have to be open to ideas presenting themselves to you. You have to listen carefully at all times, really, because those answers are presented to you. Clients give you answers. I'll tell you, in the first meeting of every client meeting, I can tell you the client gives me the answer to the problem, like 99% of the time. They don't realize they do, but they do. So, being a good designer is being a great listener. And this for Levi's also, they came to me not asking for a book. They said they needed some sort of design thing that could talk to their over 20,000 sales force and to their retail customers. And so I said, give me a little time. A day later, I said, let's do a book. And this is a pair of Levi's jeans. The cover is chipboard in the same material as the first Levi's patches, the actual tag that appears on the back of a pair of 501 jeans. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I did in this book, of which I actually produced this book in totality for them, I had them give me, we did around 60,000 of these books. I had them give me 60,000 red tabs, and I had them bound into the back of the book there. So, a surprise, a wonderful surprise. And here's this really lovely, heavy book with this thick chipboard cover that is, in fact, a part of a pair of Levi's jeans. Well, my client actually originally said, oh, are you going to cover the book in denim? I said, no, because that wouldn't be true to a pair of jeans. It's not a denim book. It's a book about denim. And so here is paper, and the paper tag in back was the perfect vehicle for the cover of this book. And then on the inside, once again, worked on the copy. You wore them in the California gold mines during the boom years, during the Depression, on assembly lines, in the fields, in small towns, in vast urban sprawl, to school, to graduation, to protest, to vote, to Woodstock 2 on your first day when you broke up, to your wedding, to the office, to the surf the internet, with the Chanel blazer, with a plain white t-shirt, in the White House, to fit in, to stand out, to be yourself. And then the picture of Bob Dylan on the left. A challenge when doing books like this is that Levi's had a wonderful historical archive, but 90% of their photographs were from 1960 and before. And so they were all black and white or sepia tone. Now, if I did, this was a 350-page book, if I did 350 pages of sepia or black and white photos, that would just be it would feel like history. And once again, what I was trying to do is make the jean relevant to a contemporary audience. So I did this sort of typical of my work, this poster effect. And then an amalgam of all their labels from the 50s. And using the signature. I love using people's signatures. And then this is also a naming project. This Williams Sonoma owns a number of companies. They own Pottery Barn and West Elm. And then they wanted to start a new company that would be all about monogramming, because they had a facility that just did monograms, but was underutilized. So the exec VP came to me, and it was just her and myself, and she said, I want to start this business using all this monogram equipment we have and put it on handbags and personalized objects for, personalized objects. And the very first thing was to come up with the name. And over the course of a couple of days, we came up with Mark and Gram, making your mark and a monogram. So therefore the name, did the identity, and then applied the identity. We did everything for this. We launched this company with Marta Benson, who was the exec VP, now president of Pottery Barn. And it was just a fantastic project, all very clean with all the embroidery. I actually did the design of all the monograms themselves. So this black letter right over here, which was really great to do, some scripts. So we did catalogs, packaging, and art directed every photo shoot. This is my dog, Zoe. So that's what, a designer really does everything. So art directing the photo shoot, we didn't have a lot of money for these shoots. This is just a plain back wall, but I thought, let's go ahead, photograph a dog biscuit. It said woof. So I had a great stylist. She had found this dog biscuit that said woof. Had the photographer shoot it on set that day. I planned this shot later on in the day, and then we just got an IKEA frame. We put it in there, put it up there with this beautiful Jakobsen chair, and voila, here we have a photo that tells a story. The medium is the message, Marshall McLuhan, of course. But we have to evaluate the stylistic structure and content of any given piece by investigating if the medium can be the message. I talked to you about that with the vellum piece for Paul Drescher. And this is for Nordstrom, their credit cards. And what you're seeing on here is a hologram. And they came to me not saying, oh, we want to do a hologram card, but instead saying, oh, we want you to redesign the card, and it has to have, the name Nordstrom on it. And their old card had the raised type on the front because of ancient, sort of old machinery that you had to like clunk the credit card into the credit card machine. But I realized this was a 2 by 3.5 inch canvas that we could use. And so I covered the complete front with a hologram. And actually the way you design a hologram is much the way you design animation. You actually have to design all these different stills, and then you give it to the hologram manufacturer, and then they marry all those stills together. So as you tilt it, it actually goes to this mini animation. Clorox, well, people say, oh God, Clorox, that sounds like a really boring client. Well, it's not, in that I knew this was a book for them. That bottle, that Clorox bottle, is as iconic as a pair of Levi's jeans. And just so you know, you don't make much money on books at all, but one of the things that I said to them is, I'll do this project if, in fact, we can make this cover be an actual Clorox bottle. And this is actually how you're going to see the book, my monograph, which actually used this same technique, which is vacuum formed plastic. And so I actually worked with the engineers at Clorox, and they recreated the bas relief die that was vacuum formed in the exact shape of the 1972 Clorox bottle, which is their iconic bottle. And then you can see peeking through on the end papers here. This is all the other brands that they have, SOS and I don't know, whatever, what other Burt's Bees and all the other companies that they own under their umbrella. But instead of showing them as little logos, let's make them really big, because as little logos, they're sort of, I mean, you know, they're sort of boring, but you know, really big or really small really works. That's another thing you're about to see later on. But this was a really big, take those logos that are really sort of ugly and blast them really big. And all of a sudden you have this pure white cover juxtaposed against this beautiful interior. Cat Street project was artist in residency project, mainly conceptual site-specific pieces. And when the medium's the message, this was the essence of just a raw space. And that was what the artists were given in terms of what they had to occupy. And so with Cap Street Project, this is the raw space. The cover of this book was the raw space. And then the interior, through type only, shows the type of exhibitions that the artist was doing. This artist layered pieces, one on top of the other very densely, and then they got lighter and lighter. So I reinterpreted that in typography. This, the title of this piece was Relocation Story. So I made the type really large as if it's relocating on the page. So design must surprise and inform. Surprise your audience with the unexpected, then allow their curiosity to lead them to the message. This is, if there's anything that you're taking away, this is a key one, because you have to want to approach what you're designing. You have to make your audience want to approach what you're designing. Nope, sorry about that. This was for AIGA for the Get Out the Vote poster. And this, once again, was, this was this year actually for Stanford. And so surprise and inform. So I actually covered the name, these posters. I took their title, Identification, Defense. So what does that mean? So I covered up the woman's eyes, and, you know, so that really talks about identification, and like, it makes you want to look at it, because why are we doing this? It makes you really want to read the copy and attend the lecture. I also did the logos at the bottom, which you see here, Center for the Study of the Novel, and this simple little box-like shape turns into a book where you just add the angle. Also into a little voice bubble. Speculative fictions, possible futures for the planet. So these beautiful images, this Dutch painting for the lecture on beauty or literature in the 18th century, which is when this piece was done. For Thomas Keller, he was coming up with a line of chocolates, K+M. And I was not involved with the naming. I think it was a problematic name. And when they came to me, I had to figure out how to make a name that didn't reference his name. It stands for Keller plus Manny, the person who he collaborated with in creating this chocolate. And chocolate packaging is usually very sort of decorative. Lots of beautiful chocolate packaging out there. But if you want to stand apart on the shelf, I wasn't going to do a lot of swirly gold foil embossed, because that's been done. And that's our challenge, you know, it's been done. So conceptually, I took it so that the dark chocolate was in a black box, the dark milk, dark and white, and then milk chocolate all white. And then solve that problem of the name by stacking Thomas Keller, Armando Manny, and you got the, you inferred that was K+M. So we got his name up there, as much as he was very reticent to have his name on the chocolate at all. It is, I knew what was going to sell the chocolate. So multiples work. Lots, just about anything makes for a memorable visual. For restaurant and store, all these beautiful quince berries and flowers, the cabbage heads here, abalone shells, and charcoal. So lots of them. The photography, this is a press kit. This is a large folder. It was about 16 inches tall. And it really, when you opened it up, it was sort of a wow moment. For Sculpture Center, so didn't just do one logo. As a matter of fact, I have to sort of credit it. Sculpture Center in New York is wanted to rethink how sculpture was being presented, and so they did new programming that invited artists to create work that was more about volume rather than about object. So I wanted, and it was in Long Island City, which was sort of a very new, sort of PS1 had just opened there, a very new area. And I wanted to have the identity reflect the vibrancy of their new programming. So Sculpture Center here, the SC, 3 different versions, and they were the signs, the building was done by Maya Lin, and the exterior signs used each one of these logos in a different place. Which, let me tell you, this is what MTV did way back when. For another artist series at CCAC, we didn't know what these artists would be doing. It was once again site-specific installations, so I just worked with their names. This is actually the swatches from an F and an H. So that's what made Fabrici Bears. Spaced out, I just did this illustration because it just felt appropriate to the name. And this was a series of architects, and so I layered the type, one on top, and the name of the, spelling out the name of the artists. And this was actually for Mark and Graham also. I think Sean and I love an asterisk, a good asterisk. You're going to see a few more coming up. But, you know, multiples. And once again, when you put these together, you have this, it really makes an impact. So extremes work, really large or really thick or really small or really colorful or really simple or really dense. And really, they work. Another book for Levi's. This was actually just a research book that they did, but this was really oversized. This was 24 inches tall. And the spiral that you're seeing here in the center was a 2-inch aluminum spiral. This was also, all the pages were laminated on chipboard. So it nearly, you know, had a really substantial weight to it. I'm going to talk a little bit about type here just because I see this. This is Bell Gothic, and which, like, what makes it unique is that there are the serifs on the eye. Actually, it was designed by Matthew Carter for the for Bell Telephone, for the yellow pages. I don't know if there's anybody in the audience who remembers what those were, but if you do know what they were, you know that they had a lot of very small type, and they put the serif on the eye so it could distinguish itself from L's. But if the word didn't have an I in it, it would have been a waste of a typeface. I could have used any trade Gothic or Gothic typeface. But here was this, once again, I had 2 eyes here, Fashion Fusion, which actually that was alliterations I love. And it presented itself perfectly with me being able to use the eye. This was an annual report, another sort of dated type of communication piece, but every company used to do annual reports, and this one was really small. It was only about 4 inches tall. The reason being is it was showing the history of the new San Francisco airport that was built. This was their 2000 annual report, the year 2000. And the images that were taken, which were by construction workers, et cetera, were just like little, from their little, you know, pocket cameras. And so I literally made a little teeny book because the resolution wasn't there. Although over here, I actually loved the way it looked when I sort of blew up all the car rental logos. But this was a little teeny book that actually the people who are also getting the annual report could put in their back pocket. And also it was a very different than a standard annual report. So that surprise and educate. For Design Within Reach, you saw that What is Green. This one was a quarterly book, seasonal book. And for outdoor, this was also about 4.5 inches tall. And there's a bird on the cover, the Hawaiian cardinal, which talks about which comes to Hawaii in the spring and late spring, and was the introduction to their outdoor furniture. So really big or really small or really thick? Well, my monograph, which came out recently, is in fact all those things. It weighs about 7 pounds. And it is the vacuum cover, which you now recognize, that technique that I learned from for the Clorox book. I call this, I call this cover pattern, which I did for Luna Textiles, mitosis, which is the formation of the cells. You can see how they're splitting here. And then the interior of the book has vellum pages with the designisms that I have on here. You can get this book on Amazon or from Letterform Archive, which is a great resource for you all to know about. Letterformarchive.com, they have it there, but it's also available, Morla Design. But so this was, it was great. And I think epitomizes, hopefully, what I've learned over the last 40 years of designing. And I have a whole section of the book just on not just typefaces, but these are individual letters and what makes those letters unique to that font, i.e. like what I just talked about with Bell Gothic. For example, Eric Spiekerman's Meta, this snake, which is what they call this type of drop G, is really unique. And so if I'm using Meta, I nearly always want to make sure that there's going to be a G in the word. Or this beautiful, Bedoni, which is such a beautiful font. This F is a perfectly balanced lowercase f. So accidents often produce the best solution, but only you can recognize the difference between an accident and your original intent. And that's why I'm a big believer in doing everything from beginning to end, honestly, because you don't know when that accident is going to present itself. Example for this is from 1990. This wonderful photograph of this model, the bald model, and okay, this is early days of Photoshop, Photoshop, 1.0, and a designer in the office scanned it in, and I was going to work on it really early the next morning, and I look at the scan. It was a continuous tone photograph, very smooth, and when the scan came in, it came out sort of pixelized like this. It's like, oh. And then I thought, no, this is perfect, because the name of the series, which I named, was The Radical Response. So in fact, in 1990, this did look radical because we were seeing these pixels, the response, the shout coming out of her mouth. So everything about this is talking about what the name of the piece is, but also talking about mistakes. The mistake of being able to recognize that, oh, even though this is a mistake, I love the way it looks, was also true with the type. That was my handwriting. Back in the days of early, I don't even know if there's Illustrator actually, you had to get rid of the centers of the fill, it was called. I happen to like the way it looks, so I kept it that way. Are we running out of time, Sean?
Yeah, we have a bunch of questions, but I actually had a question about this poster. So I was talking to a group of students a couple days ago, and one of them had the question of, they said, oh, I'm worried this is too much. Like, will the client accept it? And something you're so good at, and I think this is a great example of that, is just sort of being incredibly brave and pushing forward, never allowing something to be just sort of like medium, safe, nice. I mean, what advice would you give to a student that might be sort of in that mode of like, well, what about clients that I can't do this, it's too shocking, it's too out there, it's, something they're not used to seeing.
Well, extremes always work, so keep that in mind. But you have to be able to talk design is what you have to be able to do. And you have, I mean, that's why the relationship that you have with your client, you don't ever want them to dictate what the design solution is. You want them to tell you the problem and you come up with the solution. So that's part of your job here, because you want to get to the point that you do have the latitude to design like this, because in fact, it was a perfect response to what their query was to you.
Yeah, I think, and Jennifer, just to add to answer maybe we have a few questions that deal with the same issue, and I think you can answer this is, literal versus abstraction, the balance of that. And in terms of imagery, and I think that has a lot to do with your client, what you're trying to convey to them. Could you talk a bit about, like, this is a great example. Abstraction happened because of the accident, but you have many choices between being literal in your imagery and very abstract in your imagery.
Well, I might sound really old-fashioned here, but I believe the design should be appropriate and appropriate to what that client is. That doesn't mean typical of what they've had in the past or typical of the industry, but it needs to be appropriate to solving that problem. And it would be inappropriate for me to have this for another client. I just would never take that approach. Those approaches have to be unique to the problem set that is given to you, to talk to their audience in a way that's meaningfully. So if I would never use abstraction if that wasn't the way to talk to that audience. This was a mistake because I just sort of scrawled some nonsense type on it, and it was just a concept that I was showing them, and then all of a sudden it's like, there it is. It's better that it's nonsense because they were an international company, so this nonsense, meaning that it's not one language per se, really made it international and universal. I'm going to just scroll through here, see whether there's anything. This is a book that we did. Once again, the typeface really reinforcing what the content's about.
What I think is really interesting, and I love reading your designisms, and I know these come from your designisms. For those of you who don't know, I think it's on your website. You can see the book, and also you have a whole group of designisms, and I think that's interesting. That after a while, right, Sean, you develop certain philosophies about how you guide your designing. And one of them is, about extremes. Let me just see what Carlos wants to know. April Greiman says hello.
Hey, April.
And hello from Roto. She wants to know if you've ever worked with your
husband,
architect. If so, she wants you to tell all.
Tell all. We don't often work on design projects together, but we do work on our houses together, where we live, and we have very defined roles. He is responsible for the exterior and I'm responsible for the interior, and never will the twain meet. So, but we have such respect for each other, in terms of what that aesthetic is. He went to AA, Architectural Association, with Zaha Hadid. So he, it was also a great friend and such an enormous loss. Truly, there's so few minds that are truly, truly unique. And she was one of them.
Yeah, that's great. So if we have time, if there are any more questions, I know that some people have questions. I mean, it's kind of interesting when you talk about students doing research and looking at archives. At ArtCenter, we have an archive at the HMCT, very specific, very different than letterform archive. But I think it's important. I notice, you start to build a visual file, visual memories. Not that you're going to copy someone, but the more you look, the more you can amass, right, Jennifer? The more you see.
That's exactly right. Because there's a fine line between stealing an idea and letting it influence your work. Mm-hmm. That's the most part. As a matter of fact, when I see something, I rarely reference contemporary design. Honestly, I mean, I don't look through back in these magazines, there were students, oh, well, let me look through the most recent issue of Communication Arts and I'll get an idea. Milton Glaser actually said it best. He did say, if you're going to steal, steal from a century ago, not from the present. So.
well, at least there's no copyright issues. You're safe, you know. And I think that's important. I think we always talk about being ethical, and you have to be ethical on how you use imagery, how you pay your people you work with, what you're asked people to do. And I think, as you know, you've done that so eloquently in terms of
and once again, that's seductive propaganda and what we are preaching, because that is, we are that medium to that message.
That's right.
I do want to point out that your book is beautiful. And
yeah.
It is huge. Like, okay.
You know, that's really interesting.
It is a thick book, okay? For scale, big, thick book. And this is actually fluorescent, which I love so much. You can use this to beat someone or make something flat.
So it's kind of an interesting question today, especially as we are all, Rami had a question. It is an interesting problem today, you know, when you research or you want to understand your audience more in problem solving, you know, Rami might not know this, but we used to do things called focus groups.
Oh, right.
But other than, you know, I think our students, you know, they ask, other than internet searching or talking to people, I think one of the ways of doing your research is looking at past publications, I would say, looking at.
Oh, I think design history is really, it's everything. I mean, it is. I remember going to the Museum of Modern Art when I was a kid, and they had a permanent design museum section. And if I didn't see that Ruth chair, which I thought for sure was from 1965, and I saw it was from 1914, it was like, wow, design has history. And so I think it's important for, to know it. And
yeah. It's difficult now because we're in such, right, Sean, we're in such a world of, you know, we can't leave this screen in front of us. But I agree with you to encourage students to take advantage of tactile, you know, being tactile.
Exactly right.
You can still order books.
Right.
You know, right? I mean, those are something
you can still check them out from our library.
That's right. The students can
still possible.
Can still check it out.
That's one of the things about your work also that I think so powerful is this idea of the power of the artifact and the memory associated with it. Like so many of the objects, like the books or the flowers, they have emotional resonance because of that connection to history.
And sometimes visual clues just outside your window. People forget you can be the photographer. I mean, you can create. You might not use your photography, but it really takes a different approach. I mean, I see a lot of architectural structure in your work, and maybe that has to do with, you know, your relationship, but there's a lot of architectural references that are happening. But I wanted to thank both of you again. Someone made a comment that they thought we were funny. Okay.
Well, we laugh a lot.
Well, we're having a good time. And I think that's important, that it's okay to be funny. Design can be enjoyable. Wait, it is enjoyable.
Yeah, we don't get paid enough for it to not be fun.
But I think Jennifer and Sean, you're just great examples of when you love what you do, you have longevity. And it's not a job. It's a life. But thank you all. And thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Sean. And thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone.
I look forward to getting you down here in real life again very soon. I
can't wait. And thank you again for asking me to
come. Oh, it's our pleasure. And yes, in real life, we'll all see each other again. So thank you again. And,
thank you.
And we'll see you next week, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Thanks,
Bye.
Gloria.
You're welcome.
Gloria. Bye, Sean.
Bye.